This happened a few weeks ago. I had just turned 34 and was on my usual rounds as a livestock veterinarian. I enjoy visiting farms. There's something calming about the countryside, even if it is a little eerie at times. That Thursday evening, I found myself at a dairy farm in central Wisconsin, a place I had been to before. The sun was setting behind the rolling hills, casting shadows that felt longer than usual. The barn stood quietly, creaky and worn, and the smell of hay filled the air. I still think about it. I got to work, examining a cow that seemed off. Everything was normal, at least for a while. Then I heard a clanging noise from the barn loft. I thought it must be the wind or maybe some equipment shifting. I shrugged it off and focused on my task, but as I moved to treat the animal, that clanging continued in the background. It sounded like metal hitting something hard. I felt uneasy. After finishing with the cow, I wanted to check on some other animals. I headed toward the barn. As I stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The shadows felt like they were shifting, moving in a way I could not explain. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Farms can be quiet, and silence can mess with your head. But the more I worked, the more I noticed things. I saw shapes in the corners, flashes of movement that seemed wrong. I heard whispers that echoed throughout the barn, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I thought I was just tired or imagining things. It was late, and I was alone, having chosen to stay and finish some treatments rather than leave early. My heart started racing, and a cold chill crept over me as I picked up a tool. There were strange scratches on it, marks that weren't there before. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to collect myself. That's when I felt it, a heavy presence, like someone was watching me. I turned slowly, scanning the barn. Nothing was there. My gut told me something was off. I kept hearing whispers, getting louder, like a distant argument wrapping around me. Finally, I decided I had done enough for that night. I turned to leave when I heard a loud thud from the loft, followed by that same clanging. It felt closer this time. My heart raced as I froze, looking up. "Hello?" I called out. Silence answered. Then I saw a shadow move across the loft. I started to sweat. Was I imagining things? Those whispers and every prickling sensation from earlier came flooding back. As I turned to leave, I felt cold breath on my neck. I spun around, but no one was there, just darkness. I felt trapped in that barn, unsure of what was real. I hurried for the exit, not daring to look back as I pushed through the door. I don't know what I experienced that night. I still question it, wondering what stayed behind in that eerie barn, hidden by shadows. The next day, I found it hard to shake off the previous night's events. I tried to distract myself at work, but the anxiety had crept in like fog. I stopped by my usual farms, but I couldn't focus on my patients, not like I usually did. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat, expecting a call from the dairy owner asking for answers. I decided to visit the dairy farm again. Maybe it was foolish, but I felt an urgency to understand what had happened. As I drove, I replayed every detail in my mind. The whispers, the shadows. Had something really happened? Or had my imagination run wild in the silence of the barn? Upon arrival, I took a deep breath. The place looked the same, serene and untouched. I walked to the barn, feeling a mix of apprehension and determination. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. I stepped inside, immediately hit with the familiar smell of hay and animals. The barn felt different in the daylight, but the tension was still present. I walked toward the loft, looking up, half expecting to see something lurking. I heard the faintest echo of that clanging noise, but dismissed it as the livestock moving. I took a step inside, ready to confront my fears. That's when I noticed a small door beneath the loft that I had never seen before. It was slightly ajar, almost beckoning me. Curiosity overwhelmed my caution. I approached it slowly, crouching down for a better look. My heart pounded. What could be inside? I pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly, sending chills down my spine. The dark space beyond was cramped, lined with junk and old tools from years past. My eyes scanned the area, searching for anything unusual. Then I saw it, a pile of old photographs scattered on the ground. I reached down, picking them up. They were black and white, fading with age, family portraits, farm scenes. And then I saw something that made my stomach twist. One image showed the barn, but with different animals that I didn't recognize. It felt off. I looked closer. The people in the photos wore expressions I couldn't quite read, but their eyes, there was something unsettling. As I sifted through the pile, a loud thump echoed from above. I jumped, heart racing. I looked back at the loft, and in that brief moment of distraction, I heard a whisper, clearer this time. It was a name, though I couldn't make it out. Fear filled my lungs, but I couldn't leave just yet. I needed to find answers, to confront whatever was happening here. I began to feel the weight of watching eyes again, as if I was not alone. Just then, the barn door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, panic rising. My breath quickened. It wasn't the wind. Something, or someone, was there with me. And then it hit me. Whatever was happening, it wasn't finished yet. I held my breath, trying to process the sudden silence that followed the door slamming. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation. My mind raced. Was I really alone? A part of me wanted to run, to escape the constricting walls of the barn, but another part urged me to stay, to dig deeper into this mystery. I listened intently, heart thrumming in my chest. That's when I heard it again, a whisper, distinct this time. It came from above. I squinted, straining to catch a glimpse of anything out of the ordinary in the loft. It didn't sound like the usual noises of the farm. I took careful steps toward the barn stairs, the wooden planks creaking under my weight. Each step seemed to echo my rising anxiety. I reached the top and peeked over the edge, scanning the loft. My eyes landed on a shadow moving towards the far wall. I squinted, trying to make it out. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. The whisper faded, leaving only the rustling of the hay and the distant sounds of cows outside. I took a cautious step forward, feeling exposed. As I moved, I stumbled upon an old, dusty trunk in the corner. It was weathered, but something about it intrigued me. I knelt down to examine it further. The lock lay broken, as if it had been forced open long ago. I lifted the lid, the hinges protesting with a loud groan. Inside, I found a collection of items, tools, worn-out clothes, and several more photographs, similar to the ones I'd seen earlier. My fingers trembled as I picked them up. Each photograph felt like a weight in my hand. Faces stared back at me with blank expressions, but then I spotted something that made my breath hitch, a snapshot of a family that looked eerily familiar. They stood proudly outside the same barn, but the year stamped at the bottom was decades old. Suddenly, I heard a distinct sound, footsteps on the barn floor below. My blood ran cold. There was someone else here, and they weren't just a figment of my imagination. Panic seized me as I realized that I needed to hide. I shoved the photographs back into the trunk and quickly closed it. There was no time to process, only time to act. I darted to a shadowed corner behind hay bales, praying I wouldn't be seen. My heart thudded erratically in my chest as I peered out, watching the barn door swing open. A tall figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the bright daylight. I couldn't make out their features, but something in their stance felt threatening. Then they paused, scanning the room. I held my breath, praying the shadows would cloak me. As they stepped further into the barn, I noticed the glint of something metallic in their hand. An old wrench, perhaps, but it seemed wrong. The figure walked directly toward me, and I knew I couldn't stay hidden much longer. On instinct, I clutched the edge of my hiding place, waiting for the moment I would have to decide. Reveal myself or risk being discovered. But before I could come to a conclusion, the figure spoke out loud, their voice low and gravelly. You shouldn't have come back here." My heart raced. How did they know? And who were they? My heart pounded harder in my chest as I prepared for whatever was coming next. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The figure's voice reverberated in the air, sending chills down my spine. I didn't respond, hoping they wouldn't notice my presence, but my mind was racing with questions. How did they know I was back? What happened here that had left such a mark? The figure moved closer, and in the dim light I could make out an older man, his weathered face lined with years of hardship. He looked around the barn, clearly searching for something, or someone. I held my breath, willing my heart to slow down, but the fear surged through me. The man stopped abruptly, kneeling by the trunk I had just examined. My stomach dropped. There was no way he could have known what I had found. He opened the lid slowly, peering into the darkened interior. I could see his eyes narrow with recognition. Then something caught his attention. He pulled out a photograph, the one of the family, and traced the edges with his fingers. "They all left," he murmured under his breath, his eyes glazed with a faraway look. "They had to." Curiosity mingled with trepidation. I edged slightly forward, desperate to understand what he meant, but panic kept me rooted in place. Who was he talking about? Suddenly he stood straight, his gaze sweeping across the barn once more. "I know you're here," he said, voice booming now like thunder. "You need to leave." I shifted, feeling the hay crunch beneath me. This was getting too dangerous. I hesitated for a second, then made a decision. It wasn't just fear driving me. I had to find out more. I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the bales, revealing myself to him. "What do you mean, they all left?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the tremors lacing my limbs. His eyes widened in surprise, but there was no warmth in them. "You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answers to," he said firmly, the old wrench still clutched in his hand. Something about his tone sent shivers through me. "I found photographs," I pressed, desperation rising in my voice. "Who are they? Why are you here?" He took a step back, eyeing me with a mix of wariness and anger. "This isn't your place anymore. It never was." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from below, rattling the barn walls. Both of us turned toward the sound, alarmed. "What was that?" I whispered, and within moments I could see panic flashing in his eyes. "Get out!" he shouted, grabbing my arm as he pulled me toward the stairs. "Now!" As we descended in haste, my mind raced. Whatever was happening, we weren't alone, not just in the barn but on the entire property. I needed to know what was chasing us, what was in the shadows. And as we reached the base of the stairs, I realized I had entered something far deeper and more dangerous than I ever imagined. I felt the weight of eyes watching us, and that was when I saw them. Figures standing at the barn door, silently observing with sinister intent. The truth suddenly seemed like a distant memory. The moment we hit the ground, a chill swept through me, colder than the air itself. The barn door creaked ominously, and the figures, they hadn't moved. My heart pounded, a stark contrast to the stillness surrounding us. I barely registered the man's grip on my arm, yanking me back from the unsettling sight. "Run!" he yelled, urgency thrumming in his voice. I followed, instinct taking over as I weaved through the labyrinth of old equipment and hay. My mind was racing. Who were those figures? What was happening here? As we broke through the side door into the open, I glanced back. The shadows hadn't stirred, still watching us with an eerie stillness. That's when I saw it, a flash of something metallic behind one of them. A weapon. Panic tightened my throat. "Where do we go?" I shouted over my shoulder. The man didn't answer at first. He seemed lost in thought, his brows furrowed as he glanced toward the nearby woods. "Over there!" he finally shouted, pointing with his wrench to a narrow path leading into the trees. Without questioning further, I sprinted toward it, adrenaline pushing me faster than I thought possible. We ducked into the relative safety of the woods, the trees swallowing us in darkness. Boughs cracked underfoot, but I didn't dare slow down. I could feel the man beside me struggling to keep up, his breaths harsh and rapid. "Why are they here?" I risked asking, desperate for answers. I had to understand. He glanced back, his expression torn. "You need to understand something. They're not who they seem. They don't want you here. You shouldn't have come back." "Why? What happened?" I pressed, trying to capture any hint of truth in his words, but he shook his head, as if the memory was too unsettling to touch. Before he could respond, something rustled behind us, loud and menacing. My heart plummeted as I turned to see the shadows creeping through the trees, their forms stretching and merging as if they were part of the dark itself. "We have to move," the man shouted, his voice frantic. I nodded, shaking the fear from my mind as we sprinted deeper into the woods. The branches clawed at my skin, but the pain was nothing compared to the threat behind us. I could hear heavy footsteps trailing close, too close. My lungs burned, but I didn't dare look back. Suddenly the man skidded to a halt, and I almost collided with him. He pointed to a small clearing ahead. "We can hide there, just for a moment. I'll explain everything, I promise." But before we could dash forward, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. The moonlight caught something silver in their hand, a knife. Paralyzed by fear, I stumbled back as my breath escaped me. My mind raced. We weren't safe yet. Whatever truth the man had promised now felt more ominous than before. I took a cautious step back, my instincts screaming at me to flee. And then I remembered the photographs. I had to find out. Who was watching us? What had I gotten myself into? I was determined to find out. In that moment, everything spiraled out of control. I was finally face to face with someone who held a part of the answer, and I needed to know what was really going on. But as tension tightened around us, I realized I was running out of time. The figure stepped closer, the knife reflecting the cold moonlight. My heart raced. I could see their eyes, dark and intent, locked onto us. I scrambled back, glancing at the man beside me. His face had paled, and I could feel his fear blending with mine. "Who are you?" I managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they took another step forward, brandishing the knife with a deliberate calm that sent shivers down my spine. The man beside me hesitated, then whispered urgently, "Stay close, if we can just get past them." But I was already backing away, instinct overriding reason. The underbrush cracked underfoot, and I thought about making a run for it. Then I heard heavy footsteps crashing through the trees behind us. The shadows were closer now. "Stop!" the figure ordered, their voice cold and clear. "You shouldn't have come." "What do you want?" I shouted back, fueled by desperation. Nothing made sense. Just moments ago we were free, and now we were trapped between this knife-wielding stranger and whatever had been hunting us through the woods. The man took a slow step forward, raising his wrench defensively. "We're just passing through. We didn't mean any harm." The figure's lips twisted. "You should not return to this place. You were warned." Warned? My mind raced. What did they mean? I glanced at the man, searching for answers, but he looked just as lost. And then, behind the figure, I saw movement, more shadows flooding into the clearing, their forms indistinct but unmistakably menacing. There were at least 3 of them now, inching closer as the lead figure's grip tightened on the knife. My blood ran cold. "You can't hide from him," the figure sneered, pointing the knife menacingly in our direction. "You've disturbed what should have remained buried." "Buried?" I echoed. Questions flooded my mind again. What were they talking about? What had I unearthed by returning here? The man took another step closer, determination igniting in his eyes. "If you know something, tell us. We need to understand." The lead figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the night. "Understanding won't save you. You think you can just walk away from this?" And then, without warning, they charged forward, knife glinting. Instinct kicked in, and I sprinted sideways, dragging the man with me. The shadows closed in, the air thick with anticipation. We darted into the trees, the clearing fading behind us. My pulse thundered in my ears, mixing with the cacophony of pursuit. The forest felt alive, the branches snatching at me as I ran, and I could hear their footsteps pounding behind us. The chase was relentless. "Where do we go?" I yelled, panic rising in my throat. "Ahead!" he shouted, pointing to a narrow ravine that appeared from the underbrush. "We can hide there!" I didn't hesitate. I flung myself toward it, risking a glance back. The shadows were almost upon us. As we dove into the ravine, I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on us. We landed heavy in the brush below, breathless and terrified. The sounds of pursuit faded somewhat, but I knew they wouldn't stop. We needed to regroup and figure out what to do next. My mind raced. I realized I couldn't run forever. There had to be answers that might save us or lead us deeper into this nightmare. That's when I noticed something glimmering in the dirt beside me. A locket. I picked it up, and my stomach twisted. It looked familiar. Too familiar. And then I remembered the photographs. Whatever connection it held was about to be unveiled, and I was terrified to find out what lay hidden behind it. The locket felt cool in my hand as I examined it under the faint light filtering through the trees. It was tarnished but unmistakably beautiful. I flipped it open, and my breath hitched. Inside was a photograph of a woman with striking features, her smile radiating warmth. It was someone I recognized. "Where did you find that?" the man whispered, peering over my shoulder. I glanced up at him, panic crawling back into my throat. "I think I know her," I stammered. "But how? I've never been here before." His brows knitted together, the urgency of the moment pressing on us. "This isn't the time for memories. We need to move." Before he could finish, a sound stopped us both, branches snapping underfoot. Instinct told me to hide the locket, but I clutched it tighter. Whoever was chasing us wouldn't stop, and I had a growing feeling this was part of a larger puzzle. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I did, and it didn't sound far," he replied, his eyes darting to the edges of our hiding spot. "We can't stay here." With a firm grip on the locket, I pushed myself back to my feet. "We need to find a way out of this ravine and back to the path." He nodded, and together we began to navigate the steep walls. The mud slipped beneath our feet, but we managed to climb a few feet up until I spotted a faint light ahead. "Is that a way out?" I asked, pointing toward it. "Could be," he said, keeping his voice low. "Let's check it out." We moved cautiously toward the light, the fear of being caught still gnawing at my insides. It felt like the shadows were closing in again, their presence haunting us even in relative safety. Just when we reached the top, I heard it, a familiar voice echoing from the darkness. "Get back!" I froze at the sound. It was the same voice that had threatened us before. They'd found us already. My heart raced as I looked back to the man, but he was already grabbing my arm. "Run!" he urged, pulling me away from the light. "We have to find another exit." We scrambled through the underbrush, branches scratching at our faces as we pushed forward. The sound of footsteps grew louder, a relentless echo behind us. Each step sent waves of adrenaline surging through my veins, my mind racing with thoughts of that woman and the chilling danger pursuing us. "Who is that woman?" he shouted as we ducked under a low branch. "Do you think she's connected to this?" "I don't know," I yelled back, my voice strained. "But we have to keep moving. I feel like whatever happened here, it's linked to that locket." Then, just as we were rounding a larger tree, an unnatural chill settled in the air. We skidded to a stop, and a figure loomed out of the shadows, blocking our path. My heart sank. The figure lifted a hand, revealing glinting metallic objects. "You shouldn't have gone looking for the truth," they said, their voice low and menacing. The shadows behind them loomed larger, and I realized we were surrounded. The truth was no longer just a matter of curiosity, it was a trap, and as I glanced down at the locket, I knew something much darker was about to unfold. Just when I thought we couldn't get any cornered, the figure stepped closer. My heart thudded loudly in my ears, drowning out everything else. I could see their features now, sharp eyes, a crooked smile, and the glint of a knife in their grip. "Back away," the figure commanded, their voice oozing with dark enjoyment. I wanted to scream, to fight, but fear froze me in place. "Let us go," the man next to me said, his voice steady but unconvincing. We weren't looking for trouble. "Too late for that," the figure sneered, pulling the knife closer, the blade catching the faint light. "You disturbed something buried deep, and now it stalks you." I instinctively clutched the locket tighter, a strange urge to protect it surging within me. "What do you mean?" I managed to spit out, desperation clawing at my throat. The figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the shadows. "You really don't know, do you? The locket belongs to her." "Her?" I asked, confusion mixing with my growing anxiety. "Who is she? The woman in the photo?" A different voice cut through the tension, sharp and cold. "This isn't your business, Raven." I turned my head just in time to see another figure emerge from the shadows, a tall silhouette. This one had a commanding presence, eyes piercing through the dark as if they could read our fear. "Let them in on the truth. It's about time." Raven hesitated, the knife wavering slightly in their grip. "But there'll be a liability. You saw how they found the locket. What if they tell someone?" "They won't," the newcomer said firmly. "The last thing they'll want is to return to this place. Show them." The tension in the air thickened as Raven's focus shifted from me to the man beside me, and then back to the locket. "Fine," they muttered, lowering the knife but fixating on my hands. "But when the shadows start to close in, don't say I didn't warn you." Suddenly, a rustling came from behind them, something moving in the dark. The flicker of fear ran through me like a jolt. "Now!" the commanding figure shouted, just as Raven's attention was pulled away. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the man's arm, and we darted around the two figures, weaving through the underbrush. The distance between us and them shrank quickly as we fled, the sounds of our retreat swallowed by the noise of the forest. I felt the cold touch of panic claw at my insides. "What do we do?" I panted, glancing back to see if they were following. "We find the path. We need to understand what they're hiding," he replied, determination etching lines on his forehead. Just as we spotted a faint glimmer through the trees, a sign of a trail, I paused, my heart sinking. "Wait, do you think that woman, is she alive?" He shook his head. "We'll find out, but first we must escape. If Raven is right about the shadows, we're not free yet." That's when I heard it again, the rustling, but this time it was closer. The trees began to shift unnaturally, and from the dark, ghostly forms began to emerge. My breath caught in my throat. "Run!" I screamed, and we took off toward the glimmering trail, racing against whatever darkness had been unleashed behind us. The truth was still out there, and I was certain now it was after us. We pushed through the thick brush, desperate breaths mingling with the rustling leaves around us. My heart raced as I glanced back, terrified that the ghostly forms would snatch us back into the dark. I could barely focus on the man next to me. His features were blurred, just a shadowy companion in our flight for survival. The path ahead brightened slightly, but the tension hung thick like a fog. "Where does this lead?" I panted, my voice trembling. "Somewhere better than here," he replied shortly, not looking back. I could sense the urgency in him, but anxiety clawed at my insides. Was it truly better? Just seconds ago, we were at the mercy of two strangers, and now we might encounter something tenfold worse. In the distance, the shadows shifted together, forming a grotesque dance that made my skin prickle. I suddenly realized that the locket I clutched so tightly might have unleashed this nightmare. "Do you think it's because of the locket?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Maybe," he shouted over the rustle of the dark, "but we can't stop to think about that now." We reached a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a dirt road that seemed to stretch endlessly under the moonlight. I hesitated, glancing behind us again. The shadows moved like liquid, swirling together, and I had a gut feeling they were aware of us. "Go!" he urged, grabbing my arm. "We have to keep moving." We stepped onto the road, but just as hope flickered in my chest, a bone-chilling howl broke the silence. The sound rumbled from deep within the trees, a warning that intensified the fear knotted within me. I stumbled as we picked up speed, literally dragging me along. Every step felt heavier, like the ground was fighting to keep us trapped. "What was that?" I gasped, looking up at him, panic gleaming in his eyes too. "The shadows. They're hunting us," he said. His voice trembled, barely masked under bravado. We pressed on, but the deeper we ran, the more I felt a presence behind us. I struggled to keep my thoughts straight. I needed to understand. "What did Raven mean by the locket?" I shouted. "What does it have to do with any of this?" "I don't know," he forced out, glancing back. "We'll figure it out. But we need to get somewhere safe first. There's bound to be someone who knows." A flicker of hope surged through me until I remembered Raven's warning about the shadows. They weren't just a metaphor. They were real, stalking us with a hunger I could almost taste. That's when I saw it, a flickering glow in the distance, far off the path. "There, what is that?" He turned, peering ahead. "A house! We could find refuge." But in a blink, the howl returned, closer this time, a mournful cry that echoed through the trees. The shadows now licked at our heels, and I felt the atmosphere shift as dread filled the air. I could almost see the shapes taking form behind us. "No!" I shouted, halting for a second. "Let's keep moving!" With a burst of frantic energy, we took off again. The glow of the house pulsated, but the sound of the shadows grew louder. The chase was on, and I knew, if we didn't reach the house soon, we'd become just another set of whispers lost to the dark. A deadly urgency propelled my legs, but the darkness behind us felt all too real. I turned back one last time, and there it was. A grotesque face twisting out of the swarm, eyes glinting with malice. I sprinted harder. "We have to reach it now." An opening, a moment of escape flashed ahead. I could feel the weight of their gaze as we pushed towards safety, and with that dark presence looming ever closer, I knew the truth lay just ahead. But would we survive to discover it? I could see the outline of the house more clearly, its windows glowing like lanterns in the crushing dark. The narrow path we followed seemed to stretch out infinitely, pulling me closer to some unknown fate. The howls morphed into a chorus of shadows, brushing against my senses, as if they were whispering in anticipation. "Keep running!" the man shouted, his voice a mixture of desperation and urgency. I didn't need to be told twice. The air felt charged, crackling with fear, and an unseen force that seemed to want to drag us back. The glimmer of the house ignited a flicker of hope within me, urging me onward. As we approached the open door, its threshold seemed to pulse with light, beckoning us inside. I glanced back, and the dark figures were almost upon us, no longer just shadows, but distinct forms, twisted and hungry. There was no turning back now. We had to reach that refuge. We pulled through the doorway, and I slammed it shut behind us, breathless. The interior was dimly lit, but a cozy warmth wrapped around us like a blanket. The planks creaked beneath our feet, and the smell of old wood and familiar home-cooked meals filled my senses. I leaned against the door, panting, my heart racing. The man collapsed to the floor a few feet away, dragging in shaky breaths. We made it," he gasped, disbelief coloring his voice. "But for how long?" I glanced around. There were photographs lining the walls, a mix of family portraits and decaying landscapes. And then my heart stopped. In the center of them hung a large frame, resting elegantly amongst its companions. The woman from the locket, a familiar face, and she looked almost identical to the one in the photograph, pinned to the barn trunk. "Do you see her?" I whispered, pointing. The man squinted, gravity drawing his attention back to the image. "That's her," he said slowly, realization dawning. "But how is she connected to this place?" As we racked our minds, the atmosphere shifted again. The door trembled beneath an unseen force, and I felt it then. The shadows were clawing at the edges, seeking entry as they whispered promises of a truth long hidden. My gut churned with tension. This girl, she must have known something. Maybe she was trying to warn us, I said, my voice trembling as a knot tightened in my throat. What did we awaken? The man shuffled to the window, peering out as the shadows swirled around the house, relentless in their pursuit. "Whatever it is, it wants us," he affirmed grimly. "What happens if we can't hold them off?" I asked, dread painting my thoughts with chilling clarity. He turned, fear reflected in his eyes. "We have to do something. Get help. There's got to be someone who understands what we've walked into. It's too late to retreat now." With newfound determination, I pulled the locket from my pocket. The cool metal glimmered in the dim light as I opened it, scanning the photograph. I searched for a clue, some indication of who the woman was and how to stop whatever was hunting us. "What if—" I began, but was interrupted. As the door bucked violently, violent echoes resounding, the shadows threatened to spill in around the edges. "Grab the locket!" he shouted, yanking me toward a back door. "We have to find a way to break this hold." Fear rushed through me as I followed him. I shoved the locket back into my pocket, glancing back at the door. The whispers had turned into an unholy chorus, chanting something I couldn't understand. We had to find a way to escape, to understand what price we'd pay for invoking the restless spirits of the past. We lunged into the back room, a small kitchen that spilled into a hallway lined with more photographs. The atmosphere thickened, and I felt the weight of something dark bearing down on me, a pull toward the shadows lingering just beyond the threshold. "How do we stop it?" I exclaimed, panic encroaching on reason. With every moment I felt less in control, less like a participant in this story, and more like a pawn. The man hesitated, glancing at the photos. "Maybe the answers are here," he said, his voice resolute. "We just need to find them before they find us." The walls felt alive, closing in as we scanned for clues. I could feel time slipping away, the whispers growing louder as the shadows coiled, wrapping their tendrils around the house, eager to reclaim what had been disturbed. Everything felt wrong. The very air trembled. I turned to him and his face was grim. What if confronting them is the only way to set ourselves free? As the shadows pressed against the walls, I nodded reluctantly. "What do we do?" Then suddenly the photographs began to shake. I had the unsettling sense they were bearing witness to something far beyond us. An unbridled truth, just waiting to be discovered. Whatever it was still out there, watching, weaving its narrative into the fabric of the shadows and our lives. "I still think about it sometimes," I whispered in disbelief, caught in the moment as it felt like everything could collapse around us at any moment. I moved closer to the photographs on the wall, my breath catching as a name emerged whispered from the depths of the darkness, brushing against my ears. And just then, as darkness enveloped us, my heart sank, realization washing over me. The past was not just echoing its memories, it was wrapping its fingers around us, tightening its grip. We might have run away, but would we ever truly escape? For now, questions lingered in the shadows, while the truth slumbered just beneath the surface, still waiting for its moment, waiting for us to return and unlock the darkness hidden within.